of the attributes. This is the material we're using for our mindset part. And I love Perseverance. I love how he broke it down. And by the way, on Fridays, I'm given grace to cover any of the content that comes up, as always. And I'd even love to hear more on courage, such an important chapter that I was not able to share with you guys yesterday with my schedule. And so excited to hear some of your nuggets from there if you feel so inclined. And as always, it's your guys' room. So I'm going to go check on my attendees, see if anybody's mic's hot and they want to speak up. Miss Kim, can we start with you?
Yep. Anxiety, page 48. Anxiety and uncertainty, when they are combined, create fear. Most of the people responded to that fear by retreating into their caves. This resonated with me in a variety of different ways. How two people can experience fear and have very, very different views on how to tackle it. And therefore, the outcomes are even different.
Yeah, and my fun part on this is going back to the courage section. And, we were chatting on our, by the way, we have an accountability group right here every morning, an hour before this, that works on accountability for conversations for the purpose of building their teams and organizations. And we had a conversation around this because a lot of people run with a fear. They're anxious about having conversations, and there's uncertainty about the outcome. So they just don't do it. And as you guys know, in real estate, we are compensated in direct proportion to the number of conversations we have. So that fear stopping us is getting in the way. The cool part about the psychology later on in the chapter, if you feel the fear and do it anyway, you get a reward. You get a dopamine hit, the most powerful chemical that triggers all kinds of other addictions. And if you keep facing your fear and doing it over and over, you'll keep getting that dopamine hit, though less and less and less until all of a sudden magically the fear is gone. By repeating and facing the fear and doing it consistently over and over, you will, as the author uses, inoculate yourself from it. And that's why I'm leaning on you guys to get into conversation time in the afternoon from 2 to 5 o'clock Central. Be around other people that are facing the fear and doing it anyway, which will give you more courage. Connecting with people always does. Ryan, you got more on this? What do you got, brother?
Well, going into the next chapter of Fall 7 Times, Get Up 8, and to talk about perseverance, it talks about persistence requires patience. Tenacity requires impatience. However, the balance of the two is actually perseverance. And understanding that principle of what that's asking for is actually, a pretty cool concept in the grand scheme of things. He was talking about, like, a mechanic, if they had they need to go through things with tenacity, because they'll check the belts, and if the belts are fine, they'll go on to the next piece of it, like, where's the actual failure in it. But like persistence of it is like, trying to, I think he was saying, trying to sculpt a rock and, hitting it, 100 times, but that 101st time it cracks. But perseverance is the balance of the two. And that's what he was talking about with people when they had like 150 people go through the Navy SEALs training, 17, 6 months later, came out the other side that didn't wash out. That's what perseverance is. So I found that, a really good story and analogy of how to describe perseverance and the balance between tenacity and persistency.
So here's the fun part for me, Ryan, because you and I are wired somewhat similarly. So we can talk about anything, right?
Yeah.
And the only difference between Ryan and I that I always look at is I've just about 15, 20 years farther down the road than he is. So a little more time on task over time. So tenacity, persistency. Up to this point, which one has shown up more in your life?
I probably have a little bit more tenacity than I do persistency.
Amen, brother. And by the way, it serves us well, especially on the early phases of getting a business going, where we got to figure out move. And yet that persistent piece is now back to the conversation time. We're going to be tenacious on maybe testing different scripts to see what works in that space. Yet we're going to be persistent about making sure we have conversations every single day for the rest of our career. That's how these two can interplay.
It's like a
And then
sliding
there was
scale.
Exactly.
Like,
and then there was one other leg on it. Maybe client's got that piece. Client, I see your mic's hot. What do you got?
Oh, no. I was actually going to ask a question.
Well, that is what you've got.
Okay. So why does persistence specifically require patience?
I believe what the author was going in there as we read the material is the definition of the two. Persistence, most people confuse what persistence really is. And he broke down. So perseverance, the overarching theme of the chapter, has some subsections, if you will. Tenacity, getting after a problem and continuing to attempt different results to solve the problem. Might be a great other definition of tenacity. Persistence, time on task over time, staying on task. So this was strictly getting to the true definitions of the two, which both tie together to be perseverance. And yet there was one other important leg, the fuel, if you will. So the two types of engines, tenacity and persistence, and yet there was also this fuel piece that came into it. What else you guys have while I let that sit out there?
So I think that's one of the things we talked about this yesterday. Like last chapter, it kind of slows down and gets a little murky. We were focused on the skills versus attributes. You could learn a skill. You were inherent with attributes. But as I went back and reread, I think what I'm gaining, and you kind of touched on it, is redefining some of the words that we never really knew the direct meaning of perseverance, tenacity, persistence. I think we would all have defined them a little bit differently. And so now what you have is you have the ability to go back and go, ooh, wait a minute. I was tenacious, but I wasn't persistent in that. And it's a good checkbox for yourself. The one other thing, and I don't know if Ryan mentioned it today, we talked a little bit about yesterday, and I didn't spend a ton of time on it. I skimmed it, but was the website where he goes through, and that seemed to be very helpful, because you can get lost in this book a little bit because you're going down one path and then you're like, wait a minute, we just backed the train up over what we just learned and went in a totally different direction. So that website, what is it? There's 42 attributes. Ryan, is that what it was? I think it doesn't sound like he defines all of them in this book, but.
No, it's interesting because the book says the 25 hidden drivers of optimal performance, and I only counted 24 attributes based on the chapters. So we'll see where it goes on that. And
well, he expanded it later on. Maybe he came up with 18 more after he wrote this book.
Yeah. And I truly appreciate, though, you continuing to bring up that piece so we better redefine it. And maybe this tenacity versus persistence, I can explain also how it shows up in the real estate world so often. You will get an agent. By the way, Josh, you saw the same thing happen in the car business. You'll get a sales guy who comes in on fire. He gets tenacious. He gets after it. He runs up some big numbers. And for us in real estate, runs up some big pendings. I got 3-4 houses pending. And then he stops doing the activities that got him there until all of a sudden we're back down to 0 pendings, or he can't pay his bills anymore. Then magically he gets back after it, gets all tenacious on the activity, ramps up business. And there's this high and low life, which almost every real estate agent lives. And it's why this persistence piece I'm always on you guys about. And Kim is one of the shining examples of every single day conversations. And so her pending number stays pretty darn consistent right now in that 3 to 7 range. And I track her numbers as part of our coaching, and I look at it, and she's staying in that range. And I can tell when the persistence drops. I've got another agent that I coach, and all of a sudden she gets down to 1 pending because she's taken 2-3 months off. She's been hanging out at the beach. She's been playing with her kids, and she hasn't had those daily conversations. So now she's going to get tenacious about it. Focus, work fast. I want you guys to keep dragging it on through your career. Hope that gives you a little more clarity. Matthew, what do you got? And then Jeanette, you're next.
Well, Russ, this makes me think a lot about the old fable, the tortoise and the hare. You have the hare being really tenacious. They're impatient. They're going at it, and they have to take a break, right? Like basically what you were saying, a salesman making a lot of sales gets to a certain level, then they take a break until they have to make a lot of sales again. Or you have the tortoise, which is really patient, slow, and steady. And this whole chapter is about perseverance, balancing both of those, which is phenomenal in the sense that I would have thought persistence and perseverance were almost the same thing in the past. So just deciding and deciphering it a little bit more allows us to consciously be aware of these within ourselves. Going to the end of this chapter, though, and going to this group, by the way, there's only about 30 people on these calls every morning, basically. And I think we are the Navy SEALs that get chosen here. I think less than 10, oh no, it was a little over 10%. They had 120 candidates, only 17 finished. And the guy you thought was the collegiate athlete and the best marksman and the most skilled was going to be, but they were gone in the first hour in Hell Week, basically. So I see this in real estate. Those that stick around, I think we have the grit and we're developing more. The fact that we're even here, that's a prerequisite right there. I know all of us will continually to be here and grow into superstar agents over time. If some are already superstar agents. So I just think it's a really cool group to be a part of. And this chapter, once again, just keeps adding. It's another building block. Everything we're doing is another building block in our tool shed to become better and just add more value to the marketplace, add more value to all of our relationships. So I appreciate us going. Appreciate you, Rush, and everybody else on the call too. So thanks for being here. We are the Navy SEALs.
Well, thank you for pointing out. And Kendra, I'm only muting you for a sec because I got a little background noise, and I'm going to come back to you after Jeanette. I got you handled. I've taken care of it on my end. This room, you guys are improving this perseverance attribute. You are growing it because of the persistency of showing up in here. I can't tell you how many faces I'm looking right now at that at some time in the last 6-9 months have said, oh, Ross, this book, I don't like this book. I don't think I can stick through this book. I say, just let's stay. Let's keep playing. And you've leaned in and continued. You're the ones that are making the commitment to growing your life. And this is one of the attributes that you're growing. And it absolutely makes me smile. Jeanette, you're up and your mic's hot. And then Kendra, you're next.
The whole book, of course, the chapter, fall 7 times, get up 8. I do that. I looked at that and I went, yeah, I can do that. I can get up. And here's one more encouragement of that. 27 years being a realtor, there's absolutely been some highs and some lows. And I started out, cold calling, and I have no problem. And, when I kind of hit the wall when the do not call list came in and didn't need to figure out how to do that. So I got out of my habits. But one of those habits was not following up with people and keeping the calls, because I could do the one and dones really easily. And so there's been a struggle then for the continuing years, just, there's levels of staying in touch with people, but not the way that it could be. And it's still something that is a challenge with me. So that to continue with the consistency. So I see that. I loved in this chapter the whole process, the mindset, which is what is being developed here, the whole mindset of perseverance, the tenacity, the persistence, the tenacity, and the fortitude. But going through Hank's experience in here, finally getting to do what he wanted to do, making a decision against his superior advice and what it cost, and then where it put him, but also how he walked through that to get back, and how he realized he lost. I mean, he's a troop leader, the dream, and all of a sudden he's back at a desk, and he could have quit, and he could have remained bitter and ugly and just let it destroy the rest of his life. Instead, he goes in, and because his vision is still the same. He still wants to be that troop leader. He hasn't given up on it, but he has to come to a new mindset, a new understanding of himself. So what does he do? He makes his calls. He does his emails. He does the thing he hates to do, but then he goes in and quotes, he makes the calls. He says, he got out from behind his desk, cultivated as many face-to-face relationships as possible, had met people, learned about them, learned what they did in their departments and what they did in the different aspects of what they did for command. He gained perspective and empathy for the people who support SEAL overseas and in training. He gained allies, people who now knew him more than a name on an email header, more than somebody on a sign, so that they have respect for. And all of that effort allowed me to grow stronger in every area, he said, a stronger leader, a stronger learner, and a stronger troop chief. So, and it took fortitude. Atoning for the discretion is not the same as being absolved. So the punishment, when you're cast out of something, you can't really absolve yourself. But he came in, and each of us has that same persistence. The point is, it is still the relationships that bring us to the new levels. And so
we all, Jeanette, we all have the opportunity. We all have the ability. And here's the fun part, because I see it in real estate. Someone builds a team and the team implodes. And now they say, I'm never going to have another team because of all these outside reasons. Rather than looking inward like Hank did, okay, where's my DNA in this? Where do I get to improve? And I'm going to start back here at the bottom and go to the same place I was differently as a different person. That's exactly what Hank did, man. I appreciate that. Kendra, you were up next. I saw Dorothy go hot after that, and then Client. What do you got, Kendra?
So it really gives me, and I don't know where acceptance falls into this, but I noticed, like, when you spoke to Ryan about the time and the tenacity, is, I've made excuses and tried to make reasons for all the whys. I had great success and then great failure, even though I knew I was the driver of it. And going back home for me was, I saw my big tenacity, and, I kind of maybe started young. I think I was 29 whenever I got my real estate license, and I had a month where I had a $60,000 income. And then to go to flatline zero, people didn't understand it, and they questioned it, and it, forced me to handle my conversations better. So the tenacity versus time helps me accept and why, I chose to do what I did, and really get me back to the numbers in the drawing board a lot quicker, which I have. I'm there, but at the same time, it hurts because you care about it so much. And even if you're the driving force to it, you still have to have the tenacity in the opposite direction of taking, ownership of, yourself. And so I think I just took my tenacity and did that, and that helped me get back to, making calls better. But first, kind of being the doctor in my own life and, solving the problems that weren't allowing me to be most profitable. They weren't allowing me to be most consistent. I was able to also recognize what I didn't like about my business and have good self-control and be tenacious in that aspect of, no, I'm not going to start a team yet because I don't want to lead them to failure. And, but knowing that was a long-term goal, you giving that, like, putting that into perspective, like the time over it, like it's the same thing that I've told myself. There's still so much time, but I think it's a good reminder to not be hard on yourself and remember where you're at. And then just like she said, kind of get back to the drawing board. But I just kind of wanted to compare it as someone kind of in the middle. That really is an aha moment for me this morning, even though I read it and heard it in the book. Like, hearing you guys and that feedback helps me just kind of accept me just a little bit more.
Yep. When we
just
talk about it, it gives you another perspective. And the cool part is it also maybe reinforces it deeper. And I want to hit on something you said at the beginning that you also brought at the end, this acceptance piece. Absolutely. I want all of you to accept each of you individually as a wonderful, perfect being of light, because that's how you were created. That's how you were brought here. That's who you are. Number two, lean into Coach Russ's belief of you that that's who you are, because you are all amazing to me. Number three, Kendra, and everybody's doing it, and I'm speaking to you on this. You're showing up here in a room where everybody accepts you for how you are. You're plugging into an organization that will continue to build you up. And if you ever fall short, continue to reach out to the people in this organization asking for help. I'm having a challenge. So many of you do, and there's also so many of you that don't. And I know, as someone who's been in this industry as long as I have, that you're having challenges either in real estate or in life or somewhere else, and you're not picking up the phone and calling each other or calling coach and asking for help. So that's the only nugget I'll put in here to help you. Dorothy, you were next up, and then client, I saw you popping in as well.
You're muted, Dorothy.
Yes, you are. I'm looking for Dorothy. I'm wondering.
There I am.
There you go. All right.
That silly mic unmuted itself. I just want to follow up quick on something that came out of last week's book that I said I was going to take an action. I did that yesterday, and I arranged to meet with the senior partner, and I brought my favorite chocolate bar and said, this is just to let you know this is a friendly visit, and it's amazing it got all the way from the store to you. And so that started everything with a smile. And net, I said, I take ownership of the breakdown in communication, that I didn't tell you that I followed up in between the initial and the introduction to you. And then I saw you take the fish from this pelican and give it to that pelican. He cut me off. He said, no. That was just a three-way call and endorsement of you. And that guy's been following me and my team around all week. And if he signs up, he's signing up with you. You know, that's how we operate. There are others, unfortunately, out there who don't, but we do. Amen. And you know it. And we're here for you, and done.
And here's the fun part, because it happens to all of us when we are building organizations. Someone else is going to wind up recruiting, or someone you're talking to is going to wind up partnering with someone else. Yeah. And this is where that perseverance gets to kick in, because you hit a low. Something happened. It broke down. And I love, Dorothy, you looked at it. Okay, where's my breakdown in this? And owning it. And it gives you, one, the opportunity to clear with them, and two, the opportunity to clear with yourself to move forward and keep that perseverance going. Mr. Client, turn that mic hot.
Hey, everyone. Normally have a lot to say. I think this is my first saying for the day, which is unusual. This was an interesting chapter for me. As I was on page 62, and it was talking about how he had to retrench, like Kendra's talking about how he got from behind his desk, cultivated face-to-face relationships, meeting people, learning about them, learning what they did in their departments, learning about the different aspects of their life, forming relationships. He gained perspective and empathy. If I close my eyes, that sounds really eerily familiar, like this guy named Coach Russ that I kind of heard speaking before. It was really, really eerily familiar how the parallels of that came along. So that was, for me, was something interesting, because it's so easy for us to get locked into our little our little square, our little computer square, and we're typing away and we're thinking that we're doing work. You know, a few years ago, there was this big thing in real estate. Oh, look at what's happening to real estate. It's going to be like the airline industry. You know, notice there's no more travel agents. And a lot of people said, you know, calm down. It's a relationship business. And that is still the truth. You know, if you want to get somewhere within this space, form relationships, form relationships, form relationships.
Yeah.
That's all.
Well, and by the way, client, it also ties into that wonderful proverb. If you want to go fast, go by yourself. Tenacity. If you want to go far, go with others. Go with your tribe, which takes a little more perseverance. And by the way, perseverance, just I want to wrap up with this because Ryan and I had a great conversation today about it. The big word in there in the persistence part was patience. And having the patience. By the way, that also means patience with each other and grace. So something happens in this room. There's people that somebody said something in this room and so they left. I'm not coming back. You guys are sticking around, showing the patience. Lord knows in the last 9 months, I'm sure I've said something with my humor or joviality or directness that maybe has rubbed you the wrong way, maybe in just the last 24 hours with some of you. And I love that you continue to stick with me and do this. So happy Friday. Again, 2 to 5 today is conversation time. It's Freedom Friday. So the conversations are focused on developing your organization, developing your team, finding talent. All of you should be lead generating for consumers. And once your consumer numbers are where they need to be, immediately continuing to lead generate for talent so you have an ability to expand and get leverage.